Today I'm very pleased to be here and to collaborate with your faculty. And I'm ready to introduce you our speaker who will tell us about stalking. His name is Giovanni Roberto Compagno and he is the PhD student of the University of Huddersfield. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Daria. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure and an honor for me to be here. Thank you to the department and to Daria for organizing this seminar. So yes, I'm a PhD student. I am a psychologist in Italy, and I'm just starting the PhD after completing a master on investigative psychology. And stalking and persecutions are, in general, the main topic I talk about. So just to understand a little bit, are you psychologist? Are you psychologist? Yeah, okay. What about you? Sorry?
Psychophysiology or neuropsychology.
Okay, but you know something about psychology, of course. Okay, perfect. So, we are going to talk about stalking. Who of you knows what stalking is?
Do you want me to tell?
Yeah?
So it's basically when someone is, let's say, is like following you and like for example, like an ex-girlfriend who is still in love with you and she's kind of always there,
Okay.
trying to bother you with it. If it bothers you, if it makes your life hard, that's called stalking.
Really interesting you said the ex-girlfriend. What stalking is?
Yeah, pretty much the same.
Pretty much, okay. Stalking is all this, basically. So, stalking is a persecution. It's a phenomenon. So, it's really important to understand that stalking is not an illness or a mental disorder. Okay? It's a phenomenon made by different kind of behaviors. And usually there's always one aggressor or a group of aggressors and one or a group of victims. Usually stalking is 1 versus 1. Okay? So, as you see in the title, I will try to present you stalking according to a new point of view. It's Dioxologia, or Dioxology if you want to translate it in English. That basically is the science of persecutions. It's a new branch of psychology theorized by Harald Hege, that is a psychologist, in 2010. And basically, the idea is that all kinds of persecution have the same root, the same origin, that basically is a conflict between two people, between two groups of people. But then, of course, every persecution has its own specific characteristic. What we can do is, in all kinds of persecutions, recognize if there is a persecution or not, according to 7 parameters. And we will see it just in the next few slides. So the model that not only me, of course, I cooperate with psychologists also in Palermo, that is the city where I'm from. The model is based on the victim, on the aggressor, of course, the stalker, on the traumatic experience, but also on the mediation between the victim and the stalker and the aggressor. Because if we really want to help the victim, we cannot just take the stalker, put it in a jail, and that's all. Because probably the victim could have kind of influence in the traumatic experiences she's living or he is living. Okay, I will explain you a little bit better. So we have basically an approach based on the psychodynamic, an approach based on the description of the phenomenon. Psychodynamic, we can talk about narcissism, obsessive relationship, intrusion, but what I'm going to talk a little bit more is about Hege's parameters. Because there are a lot of authors that talk about narcissism, especially Malloy, and we will see it here. So basically Malloy thinks that the stalker cannot cope with the feeling of hungry or of hunger that comes from the refusal from the victim, and basically the stalking is kind of revenge because of the narcissistic behavior, narcissistic link. Because he feel it like a damage, okay? But this is the core of what we are going to talking about today. So sorry if my English is not perfect. Everything you don't understand, please raise your hand. Feel free to ask me questions. These are the 7 parameters that Ege theorized in general for persecution. So the parameters on the left are exactly the same if we are talking about bullying at school, bullying at work, stalking, or other form of persecution. What changes, of course, are the requirements. Okay? For example, the first parameter is the setting. So where the persecution happens. If we are talking about bullying at work, of course, will be work. So in office or wherever, but in a work setting. Stalking happens in the private life of the victim. The second parameter is the frequency. The harassing action must occur at least weekly. And people could say, why? Why should stalking be defined by frequency or by duration or by gap between antagonists? Basically because stalking is a persecution, and as a persecution the victim should be in a weakness position compared with the aggressor, and should start to feel like bad feelings, like fear especially, or anxious, or like all this kind of feeling that someone usually feel when he's hunted somehow. Because to stalk, comes from to hunt. It's like Old English. So basically, how can I feel fear if I have only one action every year from that person? Okay, it depends on the kind of action. If she tries to kill me, of course, maybe I could be a little bit feared. But do you think can we talk about the persecution in that case, or can we talk maybe about, I don't know, like homicide or violence or something else? So it's another phenomenon. We can say that she is harassing us, or that she is, I don't know, hitting us, or whatever. But it's another crime, it's another phenomenon, another crime. It means that if we need to search for a persecution, if we are searching for a persecution, there should be kind of regular actions. And that's why frequency and duration. Ege says that the conflict must be going on for at least 3 months. What I think, me and also the psychologist I cooperate with, Professor Mangiapane, probably these 3 months are too much. It depends on the frequency. It's different if I have an action every week, once a week, if I have it daily, or 2 times per day, or 3 times per day. It's totally different. Because of course, in more actions we receive daily, we will feel fear or anxious, of course, as soon as if we have it like once every week or once every 2 weeks. Can you understand the difference? Questions? Doubts? Okay. So what we think is that we leave stalking in this direction, with this kind of direction, but we also can talk about quick stalking after 1 month if the frequency is really high. Type of actions. Basically, the action must come from at least one of the 5 categories of the violence theorized by Wieners and Helbert, that are physical, sexual, psychological, social, and economical. Which one could be like an economical violence?
Taking money away from the person.
For example. Or imagine in a couple, only one person is working and the other one is not working. Basically, it depends. She depends or he depends from the other one. I just say you, okay, starting from now, you cannot use my credit card. You cannot use my bank account. This is just an example, of course. Social is, of course, when I just create a wall between you and your social relationship. Physical and sexual, I think we know. And psychological, of course, is when I try to let you feel really bad. And there is a gap between the antagonists. This is really important. I don't know exactly the law in Russia. The law in Italy says that stalking must create a big changing in the quality of life of the victim. Always because there is one victim and one aggressor. It's not possible to have both of them. It's not possible that 2 people make stalking. So usually it's possible that people denounce each other for stalking, but basically because they try to instrumentalize the law. But according to the phenomenon, it's impossible that we have 2 aggressors and 2 victims. That one is a conflict. That one is a fight. How can we say who is the victim of stalking or who is the aggressor if both of you, or in the couple, they are fighting? Yeah? So imagine someone receiving calls, messages, everything, and then that person goes to the other one and just broke his nose. Who is the victim? Both of them, but for different things. Harassment, probably the first one. Physical violence, probably the second one. But we cannot talk about stalking. There should be always a gap between the antagonists. So the victim is always in a lower position. Lower, not in terms of like I'm the head of the department and you are just an employee. Lower in terms of I feel that you are stronger than me, that I'm not able to cope with this. So I feel fear, I feel anxious. Probably I start to have psychophysical problem like headache or stomachache or whatever. If we cannot see the gap between the antagonists, we cannot talk about stalking. Probably we should analyze what is going on better and trying to understand exactly what is going on. Like, it's just a conflict, it's a couple that is divorcing, it is absolutely normal. Friendly stage, in stages. There is a really interesting theory by Glass that says that every conflict is like kind of escalation. So everything starts from really something simple, small, an incomprehension, for example, or a mistake, or whatever. And then it starts growing up. And Ege take this kind of theory, and of course, create like steps for the stalking that are everything starts from the conflict. Every kind of persecution starts from a conflict. Persecutory continuative actions, stalking. Psychophysical consequences for the victim, and then the final confrontation. The final confrontation usually could be really bad or really good. So could lead to the death of the person or the victim, or could lead to the denounce and the asking for help from the victim. Okay? Again, with Professor Mangiapane, we agree with this, but what we think is that if we have to see this gap, and we say that the stalking could lead to a big change in the quality of life of the victim, probably it's not the second one that we need, but it's the third one. Psychophysical consequences. Because basically, if you don't feel fear, if you don't feel anxious, how can we say that you are suffering for this kind of big changes in your life? Okay? You probably are bothered, you probably are upset for what is going on, but maybe for talking about stalking, we have to arrive to at least some psychophysical consequences.
Does
Yeah.
it mean that if we have two stalkers who are making absolutely same actions,
Yeah?
but victims react differently,
Yeah?
these actions will be judged in different way?
Exactly. You know why?
Like,
I make you an example. Okay, let's imagine that you are interested in me and I send you messages, I give you flowers, I come at your work. When you finish, you're interested in me, so you're happy for these kind of actions. Imagine the opposite. Imagine you're not at all interested in me and I do the same. How do you feel? At the beginning, of course, not fear, but probably bothered. Yeah? And it's a really interesting question because we arrive to another point of the phenomenon of the stalking. Stalking is defined by the victim. Okay? Because exactly the same actions could lead to something beautiful for one person, something really bad for another person. There's always be the gap between the antagonists, because two people that are bothered by my behaviors could be just bothered, or could start to feel fear. And this is the difference, no? This is the difference between a conflict and stalking. And then the last parameter is the persecutory intent. So there should always be a reason for persecution. The more stupid, the more important, whatever. But we cannot talk about persecution if we don't see a reason. Why? Dioxology, or Dioxologia again, is divided in 4 sub-branches. And one of them is the internal Dioxology. It means that sometimes people feel to be persecuted, but the truth is that there is no persecutor. There is no offender. In that case, it's something that is happening in the mind of the victim. That is always a victim, but basically is a victim of himself. Okay? So usually for stalking, the idea, the purpose is to resume a relationship to get attention, or at the contrary is kind of revenge, so it's disruptive intention. Okay? And of course you can imagine, like in the first part, like presume a relationship or get attention image in someone that is approaching a new person, a revenge or the destructive intention could be like when the story is over already and a couple broke. Yep? Doubts? Okay. So this is the core. But this is only, this is the, as we said before, this is the descriptive approach of the phenomenon. We think that this is really important because if you think on it, as a professionals, we should recognize the phenomenon. We should be able to recognize if we are talking about stalking or if we are talking about something else. It's like when you meet a patient as a psychologist, clinical psychologist, you should be able to recognize if he's suffering for schizophrenia or paranoia or whatever. If you're not able to recognize it, you're not able to help him. Not in the right way. So it's really important for us to recognize the phenomenon because in this way we can really help victims. And for example, again, the law in Italy is not so good, according to my opinion, because it could be really instrumentalized. Because basically it says that only two actions could define the stalking, always with the changing on the life condition of the victims. But if you think on it, it's like imagine a couple that broke children. I'm the father of these children, so I try to call because I want to talk with them. And my wife, my ex-wife, doesn't take the phone, doesn't answer. What would you do? Call again? No? And again? And again? And if she doesn't answer, you go downstairs at home. Yeah? It's normal. I want to talk, I want to see my sons or my babies. A lot of this couple usually instrumentalize these kind of actions for make a denounce for stalking. And of course, bureaucracy and imaging how many thousand denounce policy that the police forces receive. So how many investigations they should do. And of course, at the same time, the real victims usually suffer twice. First time because they are victim of stalking, second time because they are not helped at all. Yeah? So if we are able to recognize the phenomenon, we can help victims more than once.
Can I ask you a clarification question? So you gave this example of ex-husband calling wife.
Yeah.
How, according to your parameters, you can distinguish it from stalking? So, just as an example.
Yeah. So, of course, we should analyze case to case. Of course.
But this imaginary case when really a father tried to just contact children.
Yeah.
How, according to your scheme, you can clearly disentangle this case from stalking?
For example, we can try to understand and investigate if effectively the wife take the phone or create a good relationship between father and sons, for example. This could be an option. A second option, also read the messages, the content of the messages. It's something totally different if you say, hey, why don't you take the phone, I want to talk with my sons, instead of, yeah, you. Bad words, I will kill you, for example. You know? It's something different. That one, it's important, in that case it's important to talk with the victim or presuming victim and the offender, if it's possible. And try to understand what is going on. Why the father, which is the persecutory intent of the stalker. Okay? So according to Mangiapane, according to all the parameters, stalking is a constellation of annoying and intrusive and persecutory behaviors with relational and discriminating purposes that are repeated over the time with different frequencies and intensities, inducing the victim to perceive such intrusion as a traumatic experience, causing feelings of fear, alert, and distress. Okay? This is a definition. Yeah. If you need the slides, just ask me, I will give it to you. Discriminating, again, because persecution is discrimination. We cannot talk about persecution if everyone is persecuted. Yeah? Because persecution is on you because of this, on you because of another thing, and on you because of a third different thing. And this is really important, especially when we talk about bullying at work. Now everything is bullying at work. As everything is stalking, everything is bullying at school. It's another really interesting topic. No, not everything is a persecution. We should be able to recognize them according to our experience, of course. It could be also only distress or stress at work. It's like a manager that is like this. He behaves like this with all his employees. That's not bullying at work. This is probably stress on the workplace or other things. Yeah? So everything starts from a conflict, persecution, physical consequence, and stalking at the end. I will go quickly on this kind of slide. Westrup thinks that stalking behaviors are directed against a specific person, of course, intrusive and annoying. They lead to feelings of fear and worries, and they lead to changes on the victim's daily routine. And basically, this reinforces what Malloy said, what Hege said, and what all the other researcher or professor thinks about stalking. But these are more interesting. Kubot at Pittsburgh in 2004, they find 8 different categories in that escalation that we were talking before. So stalkers start with hyperintimacy, so he tries to get closer to the victim. Of course, in an excessive and appropriate way, because he's searching attention from the victim. Then, mediated contacts. So, messages or letters, gifts. So he tries to get attention with these kind of objects. The next step is inappropriate interactive contacts. Probably the most effective example is this one: standing near work, home, school, waiting for them. It's like imagine the fear that you can feel when you just see someone near your workplace or near your home that you really don't want to see there. Surveillance, so trying to get information in a secret way. Invasion, invading victims' personal spaces, like someone that still has the keys, for example, of your apartment, no, or of the car or whatever. Can you see how it's growing in the escalation? Intimidation and harassment. Physical, oral, and written attempts to intimidate a person. But not only, of course. Coercion and treating. So treating the victim or someone of the family or the familiars. Or also treating the suicide, to commit suicide. Because if the victim is weak, and imagine also that before there was like a really good history, a really good relationship between the two antagonists. If you're weak, and I say I will commit suicide, I think you won't feel really good in that moment. You will feel guilty. And this is a kind of psychological violence. And the last one is aggression and violence. Physical or sexual. Yeah? Any questions, doubts so far? No? Who are the victims? I'll go quickly. Usually are women between 20 and 45 years old. But not only women suffers for stalking. Okay? First of all, because stalking is could not only happen in a relationship or after a relationship, but stalking could happen also between doctor and patient, for example. Neighbors. Yeah? So imagine, psychologist, imagine one of your patients is not really happy of your work, or about your parcel, or about whatever, and he starts to stalk you. There was a relationship between you, but not a love relationship, professional relationship. Yeah? But it's always stalking. So usually women, 80%, between 20 and 45 years old. The risk of undergoing aggressive behavior, depending on their coping strategies or behaviors that they put in place for facing the aggressor. But again, everyone will suffer for stalking. Even the strongest one could find someone stronger. So probably, for me, it's quite difficult to suffer for stalking, because I don't suffer I'm quite strong, also big, but it could happen also to me, if I find the wrong person. Yeah.
So, first of all, the same patterns of behavior as in marriage considered to be stalking or not?
Sorry?
The same patterns between two people within the marriage, if these people are married. Is considered to be stalking, or is
domestic violence, I should say.
That would be already domestic violence.
Yeah, I would say domestic violence.
So
it depends on the case. But, for example, it's like a funny example. There was a girl, a woman, denouncing his ex-husband, I guess, for stalking. And she was saying to the police, everywhere I go, I see him. Everywhere, really everywhere. Work, home, etc., etc. And then, after a few minutes of communication, the police forces understood that they were living together. So, it's a bit difficult, That's why we should be able to analyze every single case, So relate the case to the parameters, but then understand that case. And the lack of strategies can be a deficit for the personal relation within resources. Of course, the stalker can exploit this lack of resources for its own advantage and reinforce the fear and the sense of submission for the victim. This is quite interesting. Stalking is a trauma. Yeah? People could suffer for post-traumatic stress disorder after stalking. Especially when there are such action like violence. So really violent actions. it's something really interesting. I want to just go outside to the stalking, but always to let you understand the difference. Bullying at work, for me, could never lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. Even if there are a lot of people saying that it's possible, but for me, it's not possible. Because a trauma, and especially if we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, you can confirm it. We are talking about something that really threatened our life. Yeah? Plane incident, car incident, a violence. Yeah. Usually at work could not happen something like this.
Unless you're physically attacked by
but it's something else.
Or somebody.
But it's something else.
Or by something. If something falls.
Yeah, but
from the dance floor.
Yeah, but
if you construct.
Yeah. Of course. But we're gonna talk about bullying at work. If something like this happens. Yeah. So bullying at work creates or develops such bad feelings on the victims, but not the same as post-traumatic stress disorder. There is a new disorder that is called. I have it in Italian, but I don't have it in English. I will tell you later because I forgot.
We have Italians; they can help you to say it.
Ah, sì, italiano. Ok. Disturbo post-traumatico d'amarezza.
Amarezza.
Yes, it's really difficult. Yeah, I would say to you, it's really difficult, but it's interesting. By the way, stalking could be a trauma in terms of how we know it. So it's like one action or few action really bad, but also could be a cumulative trauma. Yeah? Because we start to feel fear or we start to feel anxious after different kind of actions altogether. And after a lot of high frequency and months or years of suffering for this. Both could lead to an alteration of the quality of the life's quality. Yeah? Quickly, on this slide, of course, stalking affects every aspect of the victim's personal life. So usually victims change work. First of all, change phone number, but that one is like everyone does it, usually. But then usually they start to remain home, don't go outside unless they are with someone that can protect them. They change home or city sometimes. And, for example, an example of this kind of fear that victims could feel is a girl that has a meeting for a consultant, like at 7 p.m. or something like this. 7 p.m. during the winter in Palermo is already dark outside. I don't want to say here, but in Palermo it's dark already. And Professor Mangiapane was going at the studio at 3 in the afternoon, and he found her waiting there. So 4 hours before. Why? Why? What do you think? She was scared about going outside with the darkness. So she preferred go there 4 hours before the meeting, but with the light. So victims suffer for psychological consequences, like anxiety, depression, traumatic symptoms. This is Malloy again. And Aramini talks about life disruptions for stalking. So there are such big experience, such bad experience that totally changes the life. What can we do? or actually, what usually victims do? Usually they use tactics, different tactics. The first one is like moving with or toward the stalker. So it means probably if I'm friendly with you, if I try to understand you, you will stop it. You get the sense? It doesn't work. Or against the stalker. So just block, create a wall. This one could be better than the first one, but sometimes it's not enough. Moving away. So leaving, change city, change work, change life, everything. Then we can talk about moving inward. So basically, just closing ourselves. Close in our condition. We don't go out, we don't meet our friends, we don't talk about it with anyone. And doesn't help, again, at all. Moving outward seems to be the most effective strategy. So ask for help. Police forces, family, friends, social support. This is the best strategy that we can use to defeat the stalking. Okay? Always Kupak and Spitzberg. Again, victim could have a role in the relationship. It doesn't mean that the victim is guilty. I really want to underline that saying that the victim has a role doesn't mean that the victim is guilty. Yeah? The victim could have a role because there is always a relationship somehow between the stalker and the victim. And that was also what we were saying before. The stalking is defined by the victim. So his characteristic or her characteristic have a role into the persecution. A strong person usually doesn't suffer for stalking. Yeah? So it's not only about the specific characteristic of the stalker or of the victim, but it's also about the dysfunctional emergent system caused by the joint of both characteristics. So from one end, we can see the distortion of the relational prototypes of the stalker, but on the other end, the victim's inability to face proactively, to cope with what is going on. Doubts? Questions? So basically, what we think is that when we analyze stalking, we always have to look at three different monitors: the victim, the stalker, and the relationship. Of course, criminology or psychology or parameters, whatever, relationship and victimology in this case. Again, it doesn't mean the victim is guilty. It doesn't mean that the victim wants or is doing something because she really wants to be stalked. No, at all. It means that if we want to help the victim, we should be able also to understand why that girl, that man is suffering for it. And again, psychology. When we search for a partner, usually, we have kind of scheme inside that we follow somehow, unconscious. And when we imagine, it's really common that a girl who is suffering for violence in a couple, at the end, can broke up with their boyfriend, start another relationship, and usually this other relationship is always a violent one. Again, it happens the same for the stalking. It could happen the same. So we should be able to recognize victim's characteristic and at the same time the stalker characteristic. Because if we just take the stalker and put it in the jail without working with him, he will go out. And pretty soon, because stalking is not like a real violence according to the law. He will be so much angry than before. And if, for a lot of reasons, he won't meet the ex-partner anymore, he will do the same with another one. So we always need to be able to understand what is going on and work with all the characteristics, all the protagonists of the stalking, of the characters. I want to conclude with two really nice piece of works. They are inserted in a thesis of one of my colleagues in Palermo. She uses these words in her thesis. So the first one is a stalker, or as you will see, an next one. Unfortunately, for 5 months I've been a stalker. At the end of 2 years relationship, I could not accept the fact that it was over. I called her all the time. I was at her home when she came back from work. I was present in her office without being invited. I sent her gifts on gifts, and I was angry because she did not accept them. I followed her when she was going out with friends, and I was terribly jealous looking at her hugging some other man. Because of me, she had to change her phone number and ask for a break at work. Then I understood what I was doing. What should I say? Nobody's perfect. The problem is that when I got it, I could not even apologize, because it would have been like continuing stalking. Because also apologize could be feel from the victim as another action, another try from the stalker to get attention. Yes? So these are the words of a stalker, and you already can feel how could it be. Victim. The night has become a space where thoughts go so unstoppable that I cannot sleep anymore. The fierce monster caresses my shoulder. I feel him inside my bones. He suffocates me by greedily breathing my hair and blowing my life out of me. That life that I cannot live anymore. This hallucinating experience takes away my hope, weak but still alive, to be able to resume my life as before. Every moment of my life is absorbed by terror. I'm afraid. I can see any solution. Everything is an empty and fear glacier around me. He is what I would like to live forever, to return to life, to return to exist. Thank you. I hope it's written right. Any questions?
I have one question.
how possibly could the stalker's behavior could be changed? Because you talked shortly about the criminology, and according to this slide about this, like a stalker says, she just did not get at all that it's absolutely terrifying experience. He just said, well, nobody's perfect, like it was like kind of usual thing to persecute someone.
As a psychologist, the best things I can propose is like a treatment.
What kind of treatment?
It depends on the kind of problematics you have, of course. Because stalking is not, as we said, stalking is not mental disorder. Everyone could do it. Yeah? So imagine someone that is not able, is not used, because he's a bit ugly maybe, or because never feel love in his life before. Yeah? He tried to approach a girl, but he don't know really how to do it, because it's the first time. It could happen. Not necessarily is crazy or is a narcissistic, he has a narcissistic personality or psychopathic. He's just not able. So of course it depends which are your characteristics, why you are doing this, and you can choose the best treatment, or psychological one, of course.
Yeah, so you sort of alluded to this during your presentation. I was just wondering, empirically, what are some of the risk factors, some of the predictors for stalking behavior or for being stalked? Like, what does the research say?
It's really interesting. There are a lot of researches. Some of them thinks that personality traits could be a good predictor, especially in the joint between, again in English would be difficult to say, but ambiguous personality, right, in English?
Ambiguous.
Yeah, I will say it to you again, because
Maybe
English,
Italian.
yeah.
That's okay.
So, personality could be one. Sociopathic traits also. So if you did something, or like also you started with acting as a bully at school, for example, some researchers say that you could arrive to behave as a stalker in the future. But it's really difficult to understand it. For sure, narcissistic is one of them. Because they feel they are attacked somehow in their personality, in their person, so they try to react. And these are the most common predictors for stalking.
And for the victims, is there also some sort of personality or some sort of
usually weakness personalities. And people that is, like...
By weakness.
It's always like an ambiguous... I don't remember the word. But especially when you are not really strong, like you are closing yourself, or you have not a lot of friends, so not a big social community around you, not a lot of social support. If you are... how to say? In general, let's say weak. Weak in terms of like personality. You are not stable emotionally, for example. This kind of problematics could be predictors for stalking. But again, it's always like kind of statistic, because everyone could suffer for it. I mean, also me, also you, everyone in this room could suffer. Because if we find someone that is stronger than us, imagine, I don't know, a bodybuilder that starts to stalking you. Maybe you could start to feel a little bit of fear somehow. Yeah? So it's like, there are a few characteristics, but it's not exactly a correlation, a really big correlation. Yeah?
Just one question. Our person who is considered this model as a stalker should identify him or herself like a stalker. Maybe from this person's point of view, these are just the signs of attention and relation to the opposite person, and this person is not doing any kind of harm. So how can these problems solve?
Okay, if you are a smart person, smart not only in terms of intelligence, but also like you are able to recognize feelings. Yeah? At one point, you will understand that you are doing something bad for that person. An example. So let's say that you have a girlfriend and that you're doing something that for you is absolutely normal. I don't know. Going with another girl. So cheating your girlfriend. Yeah? For you as a person, because for what you think, for how you grow up, this is nothing bad. But for your partner, of course, it is. So at some point, you should recognize that you are doing something bad for your partner. And, of course, choose. I mean, continuing, or stopping, or leave your partner, or whatever. This is, of course, an example out of the stalking condition, but it's just to let you understand that if you see that that person is suffering for what you're doing, you should be able to recognize it and to stop it. If you don't do it, it's probably because you are not able to empathize, to be empathic with that person, or in general with persons.
Maybe it's just a matter of little differences in perception.
It's absolutely made by little differences in perceptions, but it's always, again, I'll make you another example. I can pinch you, yeah, and maybe you don't feel it because you have a high level of resistance, yeah. So I will continue pinching you till when you say I. Someone else. The level could be lower. What do? Do you continue till making really pain to her, or you will stop at the first one, the first time she say hi, or he says hi?
Or he says something that is not good. So maybe it's a matter of communication.
Also. So it's quite difficult. I understand what you mean, because stalking is defined by victims, not by aggressor. Again, I could do the same things at two different girls, and I could be a stalker for one of them, and the best friend, the best husband for the other one. So, if someone says me, you are harassing me, stop it. I should be able to understand that what I'm doing is not good for that person. So I should stop it.
What if a person doesn't say it to you? For example, if she has a Stockholm syndrome or something.
If she has, sorry?
I don't know how. Stockholm syndrome. Yes.
If she doesn't say to you, it's a bit more difficult for you to recognize it. But, again, if she doesn't say anything to you and she go to the police denouncing you and you didn't wrote anything bad against her, any threats, nothing, you just try to approach her, you could not be defined as a stalker, because really in that case you didn't do anything. There are no clues that you did it.
My point is that maybe there are some actions which are not to be done to any person without any regard that the person complains or not. For example, it's not good to pinch people anyway.
We already know that it's not good to pinch people, so we should not do it. Yeah? We should not make violence on them, in any cases.
Yeah.
So, even if she say, if she agreed, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
If she gave you your consent to
you cannot consider it as stalking. If you have a if you have a consent from that person.
My point. If you have a consent, it's not a stalking. But if you are pinching and the person doesn't complain and then suddenly goes to police, then it is stalking because she felt bad, even if she didn't complain.
It's difficult. It's difficult. Like saying like this is difficult. Also because we are talking just one action in this moment, you know. But if you feel fear because of different kind of actions, at some point, you will say me stop. Please stop. Don't do it. Somehow. Yeah?
Some people doesn't.
Of course, it depends on the situation and we should be able to recognize it. That's why we should know the phenomenon really well. And then analyze every single case in a different way. We cannot generalize. I mean, we can generalize the parameters, but we cannot generalize the single case. We should like understand well what is going on in that particular situation. Because if we have no one that is complaining, of course we continue. Especially if he or she is not complaining, but is also like agreeing somehow.
Silence as a consent.
Not exactly, and not in all the situations. But if we are starting something and I pinch you, you don't say me anything, like maybe you like it. If you don't say me come on stop, or if you don't say me hey, what are you doing? I know it's difficult.
I got your point.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I'm not saying that it's right to continue to do it, but I mean in such a problematic situations it could happen. Other questions? Of course, stalking is so much more than what I did now. We could talk about stalking for a lot of hours, but in the time that I had, of course, I tried to summarize it as better as possible. There are a lot of researches online, a lot of articles, so if you're interested, you can read a lot of really huge quantity of material online. Kubak and Spitzberg, they talk really a lot about stalking. Malloy, also Ege. You can find books online. And I will give you the presentation if you need it, so that you will have also some references there. Thank you so much.